Dragon Ball Sparking Zero has made its way to the Nintendo Switch and the Nintendo Switch 2 with a free upgrade to the Switch 2 version, and I'm a longtime Dragon Ball fan. I grew up watching the first few arcs of the series, and I've played so many Dragon Ball games over the years, with my favorite being Budokai Tenkaichi 3. So, with Dragon Ball Zero coming to the Switch 2, I had to get my hands on it, especially because it was just another Budokai game. If you didn't know, in Japan, the Budokai series was actually called Sparky. So this game is just a major nostalgia hit for me, who played so much of that series as a kid on the PlayStation 2. So thanks to Bandai Namco, who actually sent me a review code to check this game out, but let's talk about Sparking Zero on the Switch 2. So with this game being a Budokai game, it is very fast-paced, 3D-based combat with power-ups, fusions, and special attacks. So here's what you can actually expect from the game modes you'll find in this game. There's an episode mode where you can go through and play various stories throughout the history of Dragon Ball with different characters. There's a battle mode where you can play local battles, CPU battles, or even go online and play against other opponents in casual or ranked battles with over 180 different characters to choose from and unlock. And there's also challenges to complete, unlocking new rewards and cosmetics and things of that nature. And there's a shop to buy unlockables with currency earned throughout playing the game. There's a lot to do here. Another thing you should check out on top of all the game modes in Dragon Ball Sparking Zero is the subscribe button. I post constantly here talking about new Switch 2 games and Switch 2 news all the time here on this channel. So if you're into that kind of stuff and you want more Switch 2 information, be sure to check out the subscribe button. It helps me out a ton and I'd really appreciate it. But we need to talk about the most important part of this. We need to get right into the visuals and the performance of the Nintendo Switch 2 version. That's why people want the Switch 2 versions, right? So this game visually looks very nice, with an asterisk. I'm going to say it looks very nice most of the time. The colors in the environments while you're actually doing the battles and are in the game are very nice on the Switch 2. The attacks and special move animations during the battles look crisp and sharp. But where this game falters is during some of the cutscenes, especially during the episode mode. These cutscenes come in at a lower resolution for whatever reason, so they look kind of blurry regardless of if you're playing the game handheld or docked. And just the standard dialogue sequences look fine, where there's just the characters talking on screen. They even look sharp, but the actual rendered cutscenes look a bit rough on the eyes. And the reason for that is I think that all of these cutscenes are below 1080p resolution. I don't know why that's the case. It kind of feels like an oversight to me personally. But yeah, I noticed it a lot while I was playing through the first couple arcs of Goku's story in the episode mode. I could not understand why in game it looks so crisp and fresh, and then you get to these cutscenes and it looks like you smeared Vaseline over them. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And like I said, it's not really like it's the end of the world. They're kind of few and far between these cutscenes, but it's just a big oversight in my opinion. But like I said, during the battles themselves, this game looks so nice. However, there is a big thing that I can already see many people complaining about in regards to this game on the Switch 2 specifically, and that's that this game is capped at 30 frames per second. And while originally I thought this was going to be a problem for a game like Dragon Ball that is as fast-paced and hectic as it is, I found myself being really unbothered by this as I was playing the game. The 30 FPS is incredibly stable. I noticed no hiccups at all, and all the attacks and animations look great despite this lower frame rate. I think the speed at which this game is played really helps you kind of forget that the game is 30 frames per second. There's just so many things happening so quickly on screen that you don't even really have time to process the frame rate before you're teleporting or launching another attack, at least in my opinion. I just was unbothered while I was actually playing the game by this. Does it suck that 60 FPS isn't here? Yeah, I do think that is a bit of a downfall, especially for a fighting game. And that's especially because I think this game could run at 60 FPS no problem on the Switch 2 and would play better for it. But I will say that my enjoyment of the game was not lowered simply because of the game being at 30 frames per second. Since it was so smooth, the gameplay is unaffected, making it just feel really fun to play this Dragon Ball fighting game. However, in regards to the frame rate specifically, I do think there is a reason that this game is locked at 30 frames per second. They're outside of like the Switch can't handle it that all the haters are going to say. I think there's an actual genuine reason this game is locked, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. So naturally, after testing the game in docked mode, I wanted to jump into handheld mode because I like to play this game sitting on the couch, you know, doing stuff, hanging out with the wife. I like to play my Switch handheld a lot, so I need to know how games perform in that regard. And I can say that handheld mode plays and looks just as good, if not better, than it does while it's docked. I felt that the environments were more colorful and detailed, likely due to the fact that my capture card specifically can't capture HDR and it doesn't let it pass through to my monitor. So playing the game in handheld mode with that HDR made this game pop so much more. It looked so much more vibrant and colorful, and I absolutely loved it. The game continued to have that silky smooth 30 FPS in the handheld mode, which just felt great to play. However, just like when it was docked, the cutscenes did appear to have a lower resolution, making them still not look as good as the rest of the game. They looked better due to the smaller screen of the handheld mode, but it was still a noticeable difference between the game segments. Now let's talk about controls and how this game actually feels to play on the Switch 2. Now, the game controls, in my opinion, in both handheld and with a Pro controller while docked, feel fantastic. All of the button inputs are snappy and responsive, which is great for a fighting game as fast-paced and hectic as Dragon Ball is. I never had any issues no matter which way I was playing the game, and none of the buttons felt uncomfortable, which is a big issue that some other games do face, especially when playing them in handheld mode. So I'm happy to report that this is a non-issue for Dragon Ball Sparking Zero. The game just feels really good to play, and the button mapping feels fantastic. Now, a big component that I wanted to test specifically for this review was the online component, because for me personally, you know, the story mode's cool and it's fun and I will partake in it, but the main thing I want to do is face other players. I want to, whether it be local co-op or online. So I spend a lot of time in fighters that I do play in the online mode. So I needed to see how this actually looked and performed for Dragon Ball Sparking Zero on the Switch 2. Now, there's a couple different options as far as the online mode is concerned. You can go into rank mode and have like a rating system, or you can just do casual battles. And this is a big appeal for a lot of fighting game fans. I know this is my preferred way to play, but I know a lot of other people are going to want to go online and play ranked and do things of that nature. However, I do have some gripes with the online mode. And the first thing I'll say is that I waited forever to find a match, likely because this game is fresh on the Switch 2. It just dropped the other day, and just not many people are playing it at the moment on Switch 2. And also, another issue is that, unfortunately, this game is not crossplay with other platforms, so you're limited to only being able to play and match with other Nintendo Switch players, which gets back to my point about the frames on this game. Because you are only able to play this game with other Nintendo Switch players, they didn't want to have some sort of disadvantage for people playing this game on the original Nintendo Switch, which is why this game is locked at 30 FPS on the Nintendo Switch 2. If we had 60 FPS on Switch 2 and we could still party up and play against people on the Switch 1, there would be a severe disadvantage for those players playing on the Switch 1, which would just make for a worse experience for those people. So for this reason, I feel like we are locked to 30 frames per second on the Switch 2 simply because of the lack of crossplay and the fact that they wanted to keep things on par with the Switch 1 version, who we'd be playing against online, and that makes a lot of sense. Now, after waiting for about 5 minutes to actually find a match, I did get into a battle online, and I will say that this was a very smooth experience. I noticed a couple instances where I had some like internet lag where like the couple things just kind of stuttered for a second, but these resolved relatively quickly, allowing me to really enjoy the experience of battling against this other person online. I found this to be really, really solid and a fun way to play this game, and definitely if more people pick this game up and as they start playing online more, this is a game mode that I could see myself playing quite a bit. However, if people don't play online a whole lot in this particular game, I could see myself just skipping this mode altogether, because waiting 5 minutes every time I want to do an online battle is just, it's not it. I've got more things I can do. I could just play the episode mode. I could play other games in general. So if more people hop in and play online, this is definitely a really fun game mode. But if people don't, if this game doesn't pick up very much on Switch 2, whatever the case may be, it's just not a game mode I'm going to interact with all that much, despite it being very fun and very good. So as someone who grew up with the Dragon Ball Budokai games and has so many fond memories and so much love for that series playing them as a kid, I cannot recommend Dragon Ball Sparking Zero enough for you on the Nintendo Switch 2. It is such a nostalgia hit for me personally, and I was just grinning ear to ear while playing it the entire time. This game feels great to play during the battles with nicely detailed environments and satisfying special attack animations. It just looks really crisp on the Switch 2, especially in handheld mode with that HDR. While I do think this game could run at 60 frames per second on the Switch 2, the 30 FPS makes sense due to that lack of crossplay that we talked about earlier. Being that this is only available to play with other Switches, it makes sense that they'd want to keep it on parity with the Switch 1, so that way there was no disadvantage for those players. And On top of that, the 30 FPS was just so smooth, it didn't really feel like a hindrance at all while actually playing the game. And with all the different characters and unlockables, story modes, online battles, and even local co-op play, there is a lot of content packed into this game, and the Switch 2 version visually is quite nice on the eyes everywhere except for those cutscenes, which, like I said, have that lower resolution for whatever reason, and is just kind of an oversight on the developer's part. It's just kind of a bummer that they didn't update those to make them look better on the Switch 2 version specifically. With this game being a free upgrade for the Switch 1 version, I could definitely recommend picking up Dragon Ball Sparking Zero for your Switch 2 if you're a Dragon Ball fan. There is so much fun to be had with this title, especially if you're like myself and grew up playing a lot of those Budokai games as a kid. Man, this game, it just hits the nostalgia chord for me so hard that I just had such a great time with it and will continue having such a great time with it. It's just a series that I really enjoy specifically. Out of all the Dragon Ball games, the Budokai ones are my absolute favorite. But that is going to do it for this review, guys. Let me know what your thoughts are. Are you picking this game up on the Nintendo Switch 2? Are you picking up on your Switch 1? Let me know all those thoughts. Do you think it's okay that it's 30 FPS for the reasons that I provided in this video? Or are you still bothered by this? Let me know all those details in the comments below. But leave a like, comment, and subscribe. It helps me out, helps the video out, helps the channel out immensely. But until next time, peace.